The video arrived in my inbox like a grenade. Anonymous sender, no subject line, just a link. I clicked it because I was bored, because Robert was working late again, because my life had become a flat, airless room I wandered through without purpose. And then I saw them. Robert, my husband of 18 years, pressed against his secretary in the back of a parked car. Olivia, 25, all smooth skin and glossy hair, jiggling as his hands slid under her blouse. The timestamp was recent. The betrayal was fresh. I sat there, cold and numb, until the screen went black. Then I poured myself a drink and waited. Robert came home at midnight, smelling of her perfume. He didn't even try to lie when I threw my phone at him. Just sighed, like I was the inconvenience. "It's not what you think," he said. I laughed. A sharp, ugly sound. "Really? Because it looks like you're fucking her in a company car." He had the nerve to look annoyed. "Diana, don't be crude. Our son, Michael." Walked in then, headphones on, eyes flicking between us. He rolled his shoulders in a shrug. "Whatever, can you guys keep it down? I'm trying to game." That was the moment I knew. I was alone. The divorce papers came a month later. Robert wanted out, Olivia wanted in, and Michael, he just wanted me to stop crying. So I signed. And then I burned every photo of us I could find. The lawyer's office smelled like cheap coffee and regret. Robert sat across from me, tapping his pen against the table, like he had somewhere better to be. Olivia's name was already on his credit cards. Her face was all over his social media. "Just sign it, Diana," he said. "You're dragging this out for no reason." I looked down at the papers. The numbers were fair, on paper. The house, the cars, the villa by the lake. All split neatly down the middle. But fairness wasn't the point. The point was the way he watched me, impatient, like I was a problem he'd already solved. I picked up the pen. "You're really doing this?" He exhaled, annoyed. "We've been over this." So I signed. Michael barely reacted when I told him. He was sprawled on the couch, eyes glued to his phone, fingers flying over the screen. "Cool," he muttered. "Can I stay with Dad on weekends?" I flinched. "You don't want to live with me." He finally looked up, shrugging. "Your place is gonna be boring. Dad's got Olivia. She's fun." Fun. I packed my things that night. Robert had already moved most of his stuff out, leaving empty spaces, where his shoes used to be, where his favorite whiskey glass sat on the shelf. The silence in the house was suffocating. The villa was supposed to be a consolation prize, a pretty cage. Robert had bought it years ago as an investment. Cold marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, a view of the water. It was beautiful, and it was empty. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my suitcase. My phone buzzed. A text from Michael. "Forgot to ask. Can you send me money for the new game?" I didn't answer. The next morning, I woke up to another message. This time from Robert. "Michael says you're ignoring him. Don't take this out on him, Diana. Be an adult." I threw my phone across the room. The first time Michael came to visit, he brought Olivia. I opened the door to find her standing there in one of Robert's old college sweatshirts, her manicured fingers curled around a Starbucks cup. "Diana!" she chirped, like we were old friends. Michael wanted to see the new place. He pushed past me without looking up from his phone. "Where's the Wi-Fi password?" I watched as Olivia followed him inside, her eyes scanning the living room with quiet judgment. She ran a finger along the bookshelf, pausing at the framed photos I hadn't gotten around to removing yet. "Cute," she said, in a tone that meant the opposite. "Kitchen S through there if you want coffee," I said tightly. Michael flopped onto my couch, already typing rapidly. "Liv makes better coffee than you." Olivia giggled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Oh stop, Michael." But she was smiling. I stood there in the doorway, gripping the frame like it could steady me. This was my son. My baby who used to cry when I left for book club. Now he was lounging in my home with my replacement, casually cruel in that way only teenagers can be. Later, when Olivia went to the bathroom, I cornered him. "What was that about?" He didn't even look up. "What? The coffee comment. The way you're reacting. Jesus mom, relax. It's not that deep." "It is to me." Finally he met my eyes. His were so much like Robert's, cold when they wanted to be. "Dad was right. You take everything too personally." The words landed like a slap. I stepped back just as Olivia returned, her phone buzzing. "Robert's downstairs," she announced. "Movie starts in 20. Michael jumped up, already heading for the door. "Later, Mom." I watched them leave, 3 perfect silhouettes in the elevator doors. When they disappeared, I realized I was still holding the dish towel in my hands, twisted into a tight rope. That night, I drank an entire bottle of wine alone. The silence of the villa didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt like surrender. The video kept playing in my head on a loop, not just the images, the sounds. Olivia's breathy little laugh, the leather seats creaking, Robert's voice, low and rough in a way I hadn't heard in years. I should have seen it coming. The late nights, the sudden business trips, the way he started going to the gym 3 times a week at 45 years old. But the truth, I didn't want to see it. The anonymous email came with perfect timing, right after our anniversary dinner, where Robert gave me a gift card to a spa. "Thought you could use some pampering," he said, patting my hand like I was a dog. I confronted him the morning after the video arrived. He didn't deny it, didn't even look ashamed. Just took off his watch and set it carefully on the dresser before speaking. "It's just sex, Diana. Just sex." My voice cracked. "You refucking your secretary in a company car?" He sighed like I was being unreasonable. "What do you want me to say? We've been roommates for years. Olivia makes me feel done. I cut him off before he could say it. Just done. The worst part. The way he moved out. Not in a rush of guilt or anger, but methodically, like he'd been planning it for months. Because he had. By the time I found the video, he'd already leased an apartment for them. One of those sleek high-rises downtown with a doorman and a rooftop pool. I found the lease agreement in his briefcase while packing his things. 2 bedrooms, ocean view. Olivia's name next to his. Michael knew, of course he knew. When I asked him about it, he shrugged. "Dad's happy. Why can't you just be cool about it?" That's when I understood. I wasn't just losing my husband. I'd already lost my son. The texts started coming weekly. Always the same pattern. A casual greeting, some half-hearted small talk, then the ask. "Mom, you know that new gaming system? Tickets to the concert sold out, but Jason's dad got some school trip to Paris next semester." I transferred the money every time. Partly guilt, mostly fear, that if I said no, he'd stop contacting me altogether. Then one rainy Tuesday, he showed up unannounced. Water dripped from his jacket onto my clean floors as he hovered in the doorway. "Can I come in or what?" My heart leapt stupidly. "Of course, I'll make tea. I need 5 grand. He cut straight to it, tossing his soaked backpack on my couch. "Dad said to ask you." The kettle screeched on the stove. "For what?" "None of your business." He scrolled through his phone, not looking at me. "You gonna help or not?" I turned off the burner. The kitchen smelled like burned metal. "Is this for school?" "Because if it's important." "It's for Olivia. Okay?" He finally looked up, annoyed. "Her birthday's next week, and Dad promised her a Cartier bracelet. But there's some cash flow thing at work." The room tilted slightly. I gripped the counter. "You're asking me to pay for your father's mistress's birthday gift?" Michael rolled his eyes. "God, you're so dramatic. It's just money. You've got plenty." Something inside me snapped. "Get out." "What? Out?" My voice surprised me, low and steady. Now, for the first time in months, I saw uncertainty flicker across his face. "Whatever, Dad'll just tell your father," I said, opening the door wide, to handle his own messes from now on. The slam of the door echoed through the villa. My hands shook as I poured the ruined tea down the drain. That's when I noticed. Michael had left his backpack. I unzipped it, finding crumpled laundry, a physics textbook, and a half-finished application for business school. Not his. Mine. A sticky note in Robert's handwriting: "If she won't invest in herself, we'll do it for her." The betrayal should have hurt. Instead, I felt something unfamiliar. A spark. They thought they knew me. They had no idea. The silence was the hardest part at first. No more Robert's keys jangling on the marble counter. No more Michael's video games blasting through the walls. Just the hum of the refrigerator, and the occasional creak of the house settling. I started leaving the TV on for background noise. Cooking shows mostly. Bright, Cheerful people making perfect souffles without breaking a sweat. I burned every meal I tried to recreate. One morning, I woke up and realized I'd slept through the night for the first time in months. The villa didn't feel like a prison anymore. It felt mine. I opened all the windows, letting the lake air rush in as I dragged Robert's favorite armchair to the curb. That's when Frank from next door appeared, holding a cup of coffee. "Early spring cleaning?" he asked, eyeing the chair. "Something like that." I crossed my arms. Frank was retired, mid-60s, always puttering around his garden. We'd exchanged maybe 10 words in 5 years. He sipped his coffee. "You know, I've got a truck. If you've got more to haul away." I almost said no. Then I looked back at the house. At all the ghosts still lurking in the corners. "Actually," I said, "there's a dining set that needs to go." We spent the day clearing out the past. Frank didn't ask questions, just handed me tools and made terrible dad jokes about IKEA furniture. By sunset, the dumpster was full and my hands were raw, but the villa felt lighter. That night, I ordered takeout and ate it on the bare floor, surrounded by empty spaces where Robert's things used to be. My phone buzzed. Another text from Michael. "Need rent money." I deleted it. Then I opened my laptop and Googled business programs for adult learners. The page loaded slowly, the cursor blinking like a challenge. Outside, the first stars appeared over the lake. For the first time in years, I took a deep breath, and didn't feel like I was drowning. The business school acceptance letter arrived on a Thursday. I stared at it for a full minute before tossing it on the counter. Who was I kidding? A 43-year-old divorcee playing student. The doorbell rang at exactly 7:15 p.m. Michael stood there holding 2 takeout bags, the smell of garlic and chili oil wafting between us. "You didn't answer my texts," he said, pushing past me. I watched as he set the food on my newly cleared dining table. The one Frank had helped me refinish last weekend. "Since when do you bring dinner?" "Since never." He unpacked containers with sharp, practiced motions. "Did you get in or not?" I froze. "How did you?" "The application portal sends confirmations to the backup email." He shoved chopsticks at me. "Dad's old work one." I checked. The dumplings were still steaming. My favorite, from that place downtown with the pink awning. Michael remembered. "I got in," I admitted. But nothing." He snapped open a soda can. "You going?" "First class is Monday at 6 p.m. I studied him, the new stubble on his jaw, the way his shoulders filled out his hoodie. When did he become this person? "Why do you care?" He looked away, focusing too hard on mixing his dipping sauce. "Because Dad and Olivia are insufferable when they win a beat, and you better than sitting around here waiting for me to grow up." The words hung between us. I picked up a dumpling, the warmth seeping into my fingers. "I might fail." Michael actually smirked. "Doubt it." He pulled something from his pocket. A key card. Dad's corporate account at the co-working space. Swiped it last week. They've got private study rooms and free printing. I should have scolded him. Instead, I laughed. A real laugh that startled us both. "That's stealing." He shrugged. "Call it tuition." For the first time in years, I saw my little boy in his eyes. "Just don't embarrass me, okay?" We ate in comfortable silence. Later, I found him asleep on my couch, his phone buzzing with texts from Olivia. I turned it off and draped a blanket over him. The acceptance letter was still on the counter. I picked it up, smoothed the edges, and taped it to the fridge. The classroom smelled like stale coffee and nervous energy. I gripped my notebook too tightly, my pen leaving indents on the paper. Everyone else looked decades younger, tapping away on sleek laptops, while I fumbled with my outdated tablet. The professor, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, paused when she saw me. "New student, returning," I corrected, my voice steadier than I felt. After a 20-year hiatus, her smile reached her eyes. "Welcome back." The first week was brutal. Concepts that seemed obvious to my classmates might as well have been in another language. SEO optimization, blockchain basics. I spent evenings hunched over borrowed textbooks, highlighter smudged on my cheek. Michael started showing up every Thursday with takeout and a list of questions. Explain supply chains like I am 5. He demand between bites of low mean. His feigned indifference couldn't hide his genuine interest. One night, he arrived with a brand new laptop. "Early birthday present," he lied, avoiding my eyes. The receipt fell out of the box. Purchased that afternoon. You didn't have to? Yeah, I did. He powered it on, fingers flying over the keyboard. Can Tay have my mom failing because she can run Excel? Frank became my unexpected study partner. Turns out the retired gardener had been a SFO before moving to the lake. He'd appear at my door with cookies and patience, walking me through financial models until the numbers made sense. You're smarter than you think, he said during one late-night session, erasing my incorrect calculations. You just forgot how to learn. The breakthrough came in month 3, our team project, a business plan for sustainable packaging, 1 class honors. My contribution, the pricing strategy that made it viable. Walking home that night, I realized I wasn't just attending classes anymore. I was building something. Myself. Michael texted as I reached my door, heard you crushed the presentation. Told you wouldn't embarrass me. The villa didn't feel empty when I stepped inside. It felt like a launch pad. The idea hit me during Professor Chen's market research lecture, a community-based e-commerce platform connecting local artisans with buyers. Real people making real goods, no algorithmic nonsense. My fingers itched to sketch the concept. Frank found me scribbling in the library at midnight. That's not just homework, is it? He peered at my notebook, smelling of peppermint and sawdust. Maybe. I covered the page instinctively. He slid a business card across the table. His nephew, a venture capitalist. Call him when you're ready. I wasn't ready. But I called anyway. 6 weeks later, I stood in a sleek office pitching to stone-faced investors. My palms sweat through my blazer, but my voice stayed steady. We not just selling products. We reselling stories. The silence after I finished stretched like taffy. Then the lead investor, a woman with silver streaks in her hair, nodded. I am in. Michael helped me convert the villa's sunroom into a makeshift office. He wired my equipment, muttering about firewalls, while I negotiated with local potters and weavers. You realize this is my inheritance you're gambling with, right? He joked, testing our checkout system. I handed him a stack of invoices. Then you'd better help me make it work. Our launch day crashed the site within hours. Handmade quilts, artisanal preserves, custom jewelry. All sold out by noon. I fielded calls from crying craftsmen, while Frank manned the coffee maker and Michael rebooted servers. That night, we celebrated with cheap champagne in paper cups. Frank toasted to the comeback kid. Michael clinked my cup with a grudging smile. Not bad for an old lady. I fell asleep at my desk, surrounded by spreadsheets and shipping labels. Not running away from something anymore. Running toward. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a notification. Robert's company LinkedIn update. Excited to announce our new partnership. Below it, a photo of him and Olivia at some corporate gala, his arm tight around her waist. I swiped it away and got back to work. The call came at 3:17 a.m. Robert's voice was ragged, a sound I hadn't heard since Michael's childhood asthma attacks. Diana. We need to talk. I hung up. He showed up at the villa anyway at 7 a.m., unshaven, his tailored suit wrinkled. Olivia's Instagram posts from Dubai still glowed on my phone. Posted 12 hours earlier. Fair business trip, Vite power couple. Robert didn't wait for an invitation. She drained the corporate accounts, he said, pouring himself my coffee. Took out loans against the company. For investments. His laugh was bitter. Turns out her crypto genius boyfriend needed capital. I sipped my coffee slowly. And you didn't notice. Delegated finances to her last month. His jaw tightened. She had convincing arguments. The schadenfreude burned sweet on my tongue. Olivia's business acumen had been a running joke in our divorce proceedings. Robert bragging about her Wharton degree, while she confused EBITDA with an energy drink. I need a loan, he said. Temporary liquidity issue. The morning sun caught the gray at his temples. The great Robert Lowell, brought low by a girl young enough to be his daughter. I should have savored it more. I'll consider it, I said, with conditions. His eyes flickered to my office. The framed $1 bill from my company, the shipping manifests pinned to the wall. Name them. Full transparency. Monthly audits. And I tapped my pen against the contract I'd drafted after his call. Michael's trust fund gets moved to my control. He flinched. That's non-negotiable. I slid the papers across the table. Sign by noon or find another lifeline. He left without finishing the coffee. Michael barged in an hour later, cheeks flushed. Dad says you're extorting him. I handed him the financial filings I'd pulled. Olivia's investments, the looming bankruptcy. I'm saving your future. He scanned the pages, anger fading to dawning horror. Jesus, they're screwed. Not if I buy them out. The idea crystallized as I said it. Full acquisition, you'd inherit a viable company, not ashes. Michael stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. You'd do that? I thought of Robert's face when he realized the lifeline he'd begged for came with my signature on the deed. For you. Absolutely. Robert returned the next morning, this time with a lawyer in tow. The man barely glanced at me as he set up his laptop, already typing before he sat down. Robert looked like he hadn't slept. I poured myself tea and waited. We prepared to offer a structured repayment plan. The lawyer began, sliding a document toward me. With reasonable interest, of course. I didn't touch it. I'm not a bank. Robert exhaled sharply. Diana, be reasonable. This isn't just about me. It's about the employees, the clients. Michael's future. I leaned back in my chair. Exactly. That's why I'm not giving you a loan. I opened my own folder. I'm buying you out. Robert's face went slack. What? Full acquisition. Assets, liabilities, everything. I kept my voice calm, though my pulse hammered in my throat. You walk away with enough to settle your personal debts. The company survives. Michael inherits something real. The lawyer cleared his throat. Mrs. Lowell. It's Mems Hartman now. I corrected him without looking away from Robert, and I'm not negotiating. Robert's hands clenched on the table. You've wanted this since the divorce, haven't you? To humiliate me. I almost laughed. No, Robert, I just stopped caring about you entirely. I tapped the offer sheet. Sign it, or watch it all burn. Your choice. Silence stretched between us. Outside, a bird trilled. Something bright and careless. Finally, Robert picked up the pen. His signature was jagged. Nothing like the smooth flourish he used on contracts in our old life. When he left, he didn't say goodbye. Michael called an hour later. Dad's pissed. I smiled. I know. He also said you saved his ass. A pause. Thanks, Mom. I closed my eyes, just for a second. Anytime. The office still smelled like Robert's cologne when I walked in on Monday morning. His stunned employees watched as I took his parking spot, his chair, his company. Frank met me in the lobby with 2 coffees. Ready for your first mutiny. I handed him the restructuring plans. Tell accounting I'm cutting bonuses this quarter to fund severance packages. His eyebrows shot up. Starting with bloodshed. Starting with honesty. I strode into the all-hands meeting where whispers died mid-sentence. Olivia's empty desk sat conspicuously near the front, still decorated with photos of her and Robert in better days. I didn't bother with a podium. By Friday, I'll know everyone's name, role, and whether you reap part of the problem. The silence thickened. Those who stay get stock options. Those who helped sink this ship. Don't let the door hit you. The exodus began by lunch. Olivia's cronies left in clusters, some shooting venomous looks. I let them go. The ones who stayed, the quiet engineers, the overlooked sales team, watched me with cautious hope. Michael appeared at 3 p.m., leaning against my new office doorway. So, you're a badass now. I tossed him a flash drive. Audit these supplier contracts. Find where Dad got fleeced. He caught it one-handed, grinning. Yes, boss. By month's end, we de-slashed frivolous expenses, renegotiated vendor terms, and landed our first profitable client in a year. Frank worked miracles with the books, while I rebuilt burnt bridges with investors. The press called it the Lowell turnaround. I had the sign changed to Hartman Solutions. Robert's one attempt to interfere ended when Michael blocked him at the elevator. She's got this, Dad. His voice carried down the hall. Maybe you should finally learn to lose gracefully. At our first board meeting as a profitable entity, Frank slid a note across the table, proud of you. I tucked it in my pocket and finalized the acquisition of Olivia's failed startup. For pennies on the dollar. Some victories were sweeter than others. The night after the acquisition finalized, Frank showed up at my door with a bottle of champagne and takeout from my favorite Thai place. Celebration or consolation? I asked, stepping aside to let him in. Both, if you want. He set the food on the counter, his hands steady despite the exhaustion lining his face. He'd been working just as hard as I had these past months. Maybe harder. We ate in comfortable silence, the weight of everything we'd accomplished settling between us. Then, halfway through his second glass, Frank set his drink down and looked at me. Really looked at me. You know, he said, I didn't just help you because I felt bad. I stilled. Then why? He smiled, slow and sure. Because I knew you'd do this. I knew you'd take the wreckage and build something better. The air between us shifted. I'd spent so long seeing Frank as just a neighbor, a mentor, a friend. But now, under the soft kitchen light, I noticed the way his gaze lingered, the way his fingers brushed mine when he handed me a napkin. I exhaled, suddenly nervous. This isn't just pity, is it? He laughed, low and warm. Deanna, if I wanted to pity someone, I'd have stuck with Robert. And then, before I could overthink it, he leaned in. The kiss was soft at first, testing, uncertain. Then my hands found his shoulders, and his fingers curled into my hair, and suddenly, it wasn't uncertain at all. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. Took us long enough. I laughed, breathless. Yeah, it did. News travels fast in our circles. By noon the next day, Robert knew. He stormed into the office like a man possessed. His face flushed with something ugly. You re-fucking Frank now. His voice carried through the open door, drawing stares. I didn't look up from my computer. Get out of my building, Robert. He slammed his palms on my desk. You think this is funny? First my company, now my? Your what? I stood, meeting him eye to eye. Frank was never yours. Neither was I. Something in my tone made him falter. For the first time, Robert looked at me. Really looked, and saw a stranger. He left without another word. But he wasn't done. That evening, Frank and I walked out to the parking garage together, his hand warm at the small of my back. We didn't see Robert waiting by the cars, until it was too late. You always did like picking up my leftovers, Robert spat, stepping into Frank's path. Frank sighed. Don't do this, Rob. Robert swung. The punch grazed Frank's jaw before I could react. Frank staggered but didn't retaliate. Just wiped his mouth and shook his head. Still losing control, huh? Robert looked at me, wild-eyed, like he expected me to intervene, to choose. I stepped around him and took Frank's arm. Let's go home. As we drove away, I watched Robert shrink in the rearview mirror. A man who'd finally run out of second chances. Michael showed up at the villa unannounced that weekend, tossing his keys on the counter with a clatter. He took one look at Frank's bruised jaw and snorted. Dad really punched you. Pathetic. Frank rubbed his jaw with a wry smile. I've had worse. Michael grabbed a soda from the fridge, popped the tab, and leveled a look at me. So, you and Frank, huh? I braced myself for the sneer, the sarcasm, the disapproval. But Michael just took a long sip and shrugged. About damn time. I blinked. You're okay with this? He rolled his eyes. Mom, come on. Frank's been in love with you since, like, forever. Even I noticed. He shot Frank a smirk. No offense, but you're kind of obvious. Frank laughed, rubbing the back of his neck. Guilty. Michael set his drink down, his expression turning serious. Look, Dad's a mess. But you're happy. That's all I care about. The words hit me like a punch to the chest. My son, the same boy who'd once dismissed me as irrelevant, was standing in my kitchen, giving me his blessing. I reached for him, but he dodged, groaning. Uff, don't get emotional. I just came for food. Frank clapped him on the shoulder. Pizza's on me. As they argued over toppings, I leaned against the counter, watching them. The two most important men in my life, finally on the same side. Michael caught my gaze and rolled his eyes again. But this time, there was a smile underneath. The wedding was small. Just us, Michael, and a handful of friends in Frank's sunlit backyard. No fanfare, no theatrics. Exactly how I wanted it. Michael walked me down the aisle, his arm steady under mine. Still weird seeing you like this, he muttered. Like what? Happy. He squeezed my hand before passing it to Frank. Don't screw it up, old man. Frank laughed, his thumb brushing over my knuckles as the officiant began. I barely heard the words. All I saw was Frank's face. The crinkles at his eyes, the way his gaze never wavered from mine. Later, under strings of twinkling lights, Michael raised a toast. To Mom, he said, glass lifted. For finally realizing she deserves better. His smirk softened. And to Frank, for being that better. The clinking glasses faded as Frank pulled me onto the makeshift dance floor. We swayed to some old jazz song, his palm warm against my back. Think Robert's watching from some dark corner. He murmured. I rested my head on his shoulder. Don't care. And I didn't. The past year had stripped me bare. Of lies. Of fear. Of the woman I thought I had to be. What remained was something stronger. Something mine. Michael intercepted us as the music changed, stealing me for a dance. He held me at arm's length, suddenly serious. You good? I looked over his shoulder at Frank. Now laughing with the caterers. At the lake glittering beyond the garden. At the life I'd built from ashes. Yeah, I said, squeezing my son's hands. I am. The sun dipped below the trees, painting everything gold. Not an ending, a beginning.